Hey YouTube, what's going on? Mark here from TST Industries. And in today's video, I will be guiding you through the installation process of our Elite-1 Fender Eliminator for the 2021 and up Honda CB650R. Now behind me, we have a 2023 model, and I will mention, we have a video shown on a 2019 model, and the installation process is almost identical. However, in 2021, Honda decided to revamp this bike, mainly in terms of aesthetics, and that meant changing out some of these rear tail panels and the OEM fender, along with a few other things. So with that, this kit is built to spec for the 2019 to 2020 CB650R. This installation process will cover the 2021, 2022, and 2023 model CB650R. And if you purchase that for any of the last 3 years, you will notice that we have these plastic clips we include. They are redundant and not necessary on the new generation, so you can toss them to the side, save them for a rainy day. The choice is yours. Lastly, I will also mention that in our previous video, Bart guided you through the installation process from beginning to end and showed you how to assemble the kits, including the adjustable kit, and showed you the installation process of our adjustable kit with the license plate light and aftermarket pod signals like the ones we offer. To save you time and headaches and confusion, I'm simply going to get right to it and install our standard Fender Eliminator bracket. Make this video short, quick, to the point, and make sure you can get out and ride. But if you are interested, or you purchase the adjustable kit, want to run aftermarket signals, whatever the case may be, you can reference the previous video we have. The link to that will be in the description below. But for now, let's go ahead and begin breaking this down. All right, so to begin this process, I want to quickly break down what you see in front of you. In the center, we have our Elite-1 undertail closeout for the CB650R. On the left here, we have our adjustable kit. As I mentioned, if you purchase this kit and want to see how to assemble and install this variant, please be sure to check out our previous installation video. Again, the link to that is in the description of this video. And on the right, we have our standard bracket. That is the provided hardware with it. And once we begin to assemble everything, you will see why there's 2 nuts and 2 washers, but no bolts. For now, let's go ahead and toss this to the side, get it out of our view, and begin highlighting some of the components we have here. With the closeout, you will see that when we go to install it, it will sit just like this on the bike with this tab protruding out of the rear. Essentially, the bracket will mount onto that tab underneath, and then you will go ahead and assemble everything. What we need to do is take 2 of these bolts, feed them through the closeout. We will then flip the closeout upside down, place the Fender Eliminator bracket over the bolts, and we're going to slide the little washers over it, and then these 10mm locking nuts. Now, I'm going to leave them a little loose because this does have some adjustability on it, and I think it's important that once it's on the bike, you are able to slide it around just a little bit to prevent any issues. Now, we also have these rubber bump stops. These are provided, and they are slightly higher than the bolt heads on the closeout, and these are provided to avoid the tail light from bouncing onto the hardware and potentially leaving a mark on your tail light. Being that we're installing this on the 2023 model, as I mentioned in the intro, 2021 and up will no longer use these plastic caps. So we'll toss them to the side. And lastly, we have a zip tie here. As I mentioned in the intro as well, Bart showed you how to install a license plate light to this kit in the previous video. I will not be doing that in this video. We are simply going to install our Fender Eliminator and close out. So let's go ahead and toss the zip tie to the side and call it a day. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the machine now and begin the disassembly process. To begin this installation process, we will begin by removing our OEM license plate. We will reuse and remount this onto our Fender Eliminator kit at the end of this video. We'll toss this to the side, and then we will grab our key and remove the passenger seat. Your key lock is located on the left side of the bike underneath. You're going to turn, lift up, and now you need to gently pull back on the passenger seat up and out. Now we also need to remove the rider seat. That will require a 5mm hex key or Allen key to remove the 2 bolts located at the rear of the seat. And a little trick I like to do, it's a good practice, when you remove something that has bolts, leave the bolts exactly where they are supposed to install. That helps you prevent losing bolts or wondering where they go. So I'm going to go ahead and reinsert the bolts into the mounting tabs. That way I don't lose them, accidentally drop them. Now with those screws reinstalled and kept where they're meant to be, we can go ahead and begin the removal process of these fairings, the seat lock, and disconnecting the OEM lighting equipment on the rear of the bike. We will begin by focusing on these 4 bolts. There's 2 up front on the sides and then 2 on the rear sides. They are all 5mm hex key, Allen key T handles. So let's go ahead and break them loose. All 4 bolts are identical, so you won't have to worry about mixing them up. Now you want to go ahead and grab a 10mm socket that will allow us to remove the seat lock bolt. Now we need to remove that bolt in order to gain access to the bolts and nuts securing the taillight in place. Now with those 5 pieces of hardware removed, the last thing we want to do before we begin trying to remove these side panels and the taillight is to pull up on this connector cover here. You will see 4 OEM connectors. The first larger white one is a 3-position connector that is the taillight plug. Blue and orange are turn signals, and the smaller white one is license plate light. With those 4 connectors disconnected, we can now lift up on these reusable metal tabs that simply secure the connectors in place and make sure they're free from that captive position. Now at this point, we want to go ahead and focus on removing the tail light nuts that are located underneath this brace. They are a 10mm nut, and once I remove them, I will go ahead and show you the location. They also have washers on them, so please keep that in mind. I like using a ratchet, especially this rotating ratchet, because it prevents you from marring up the underside of this subframe brace. Now with that removed, what I'm going to do is grab this main taillight connector. You can see it's coming from the center of the taillight, and again, it is the larger white connector. And we're simply just going to pull on the taillight from the back, guiding the wire through, and voila. And as I mentioned, there were nuts on these studs. They sit like such. And we have the nuts here. We're going to go ahead and reinstall them so we don't lose them. And now we can toss the taillight to the side. Now we can go ahead and grab a small Phillips head screwdriver. And there's 2 small Phillips head push pin rivets underneath these tail panels. I think collectively the motorcycle industry can agree that these might be the worst fasteners that are placed on these bikes, but they do serve a purpose. So we're going to carefully remove them, and voila, not too bad. Let's go ahead and hop onto the other side, repeat that step. With those 2 fasteners removed, now we can focus on removing the side tail fairings. Now it's important to note these tail fairings fasten on the rear and on the front by interlocking with some of the surrounding geometry, including this front tank panel and the sub tray. So what we're going to do is slide backwards and then lift this portion of the tail fairing gently outward, freeing it from its captive geometry. So we're going to slide back and pull outward. And you can actually see exactly what I'm talking about. Looking at this panel, we have a slide lock here that's on the front. We have another slide lock here that slides in. That is actually this tab right here. And then we have one right here on the rear of the bike, and that is this lock. So all of it slides together and then pushes in, locking it all in place and then securing it with 2 bolts and a push pin rivet. We're going to go ahead and copy those steps on the opposite side. Remove our key from the lock if you haven't already. And again, we're going to push backwards and then pry outwards. Now with the whole tail sort of taken apart visually, it seems like a lot, we can now see what is holding the OEM fender in place, which is these 2 bolts on this side and the exact 2 copying on the left side of the bike. We are going to go ahead and grab a 12mm socket, and we're going to grab our ratchet and begin removing these bolts. Now it is important to note that as you remove these bolts, the OEM connectors are going to be sliding out, and all of the weight of this will actually weigh this down. By the time you get to the last bolt or 2, it may be a little tricky. So you always want to make sure you're providing some support on the OEM fender as you're removing the securing hardware that's locking it in place. One thing to also mention while we're on the rear of the bike, and you can see, is we have 3 tabs where the OEM taillight's at. And on those 3 tabs, we have these nifty little gaskets of sort. They're very easy to slide off and even easier to lose. When you remove your OEM taillight, please make sure that all 3 of them are still in their captive geometry. And if you need to, pull them off and place them to the side so you do not lose them. They are key in cushioning the taillight when it's installed and preventing it from rocking back and forth extensively and potentially breaking it. All right, with all that said, let's go ahead and remove the OEM fender. Now, you can see the connectors are cleanly routed into the tail section via these 2 cutouts that Honda has placed. I love it. I think it's really slick and clean. So as we're removing them, we need to make sure we're routing the cables through gently, that they don't get snagged on anything, potentially causing damage to the connectors or to your bike. And now, this rather large OEM fender is removed. At this point, we can go ahead and grab our TST Industries Elite-1 Fender Eliminator setup and begin the installation process. Now, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but there are 4 holes located at the bottom of this OEM subtray. Our Fender Eliminator has these 4 tabs, and the 2 external ones actually have little hooks that will snap in and then bite, locking this in place. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Purposefully push it in. And now it is locked in place. We still want to do some added measures to make sure it's locked in place. That is where the last bit of that hardware comes into play. So we'll go ahead and take the bolt and one of the larger washers, place it on the interface, and we will do the same on the back side with the locking nut. And this is a 10mm nut. Same exact hardware that we use to secure the bracket to the closeout. I'm pretty happy, and you can see we still can adjust the fender as needed. But at this point, we're going to go ahead and begin to tighten the bolts and the nuts down. We're going to grab our 4mm T-handle and our 10mm open-ended wrench. We're going to start this by locking the rear mount for the closeout. And now we can secure this bracket to the closeout as well. Center it off, creating some tension as we tighten it. It's still centered. I'm pretty happy. And now I can go ahead and crank it all the way down, making sure it's locked in place. The final portion of this assembly and installation process before we begin reassembling everything is placing our plastic bump stops on the closeout. Again, these are preventative measures to ensure that the tail light does not get marked up by our hardware, our closeout, or any of the surrounding panels. And they sit just higher than the bolt heads, which is perfect. And I'm really happy with this look. At this point, if you were running a license plate light, you can continue this installation process by hanging your plate light, routing the wire through here, through the center hole and underneath into the center of the closeout, and routing it through the side as Bart has shown in the previous video. If you are doing that, please reference the previous video. Again, the link to that is in the description below. I think at this point we're pretty happy, and we can begin reinstalling some of these OEM components, and we will start with the OEM tail light. We're going to double check, make sure that these rubber gaskets are seated and locked in place. We're going to remove the nut and washer that we reinstalled to prevent losing them. We're going to route the main taillight plug through the center, and we're going to carefully insert these two studs into these side gaskets. Pretty happy with that. And actually you may not be able to see it on camera. If you're doing this installation at home, you can actually see the taillight will come in contact with those rubber bump stops, so they are doing their job. You're going to go ahead and reuse the OEM hardware for the tail light, starting with the washers and then going to the flange lock nuts. We're going to grab our 10mm socket yet again. Hopefully you haven't lost it since the beginning of this installation video. Once they are hand tightened, we can go ahead, grab our ratchet, and just make them a little more snug, not by much. They're bottomed out, so we'll go another 1/16 of a turn, ensuring that the locking mechanism in the nuts is engaging. Everything's secure. Now we can go ahead and reinstall the side panels. And we're going to make sure that we're clearing the keyhole, but the same process, just as we did in the front. And I will show on that side what we are doing. Now what we did on the other side and what we're going to do on this side is ensuring that this tab right here that has a hook feature on it is engaging here and then sliding forward, while simultaneously ensuring that this tab is engaging with this slotted tab here. So we're going to gently pull outward on this tank panel. There's a Velcro locking fastener right here. So you're going to gently pop that out. You're going to slide this panel behind, engaging with a tab located back here, sliding the front tab in front of the fairing, and then ensuring that the rear tab is where it needs to be. Then we're simply going to slide forward. You push down and in on this external side of the fairings. Once you hear that clip, that means that the fairings have locked in place and are secured. Next up, we have our push pin rivets. These are the Phillips head ones. We're just going to go ahead and insert them. If they're a little tough to get in, back the plastic screw out ever so slightly, and you can push on the wings. And then you're simply going to press up. We're going to repeat the steps on the opposite side. Now we can reinstall the 4 bolts we removed from these tail fairings. So we're going to go up top, and we're just bottoming these bolts out. Don't tighten them just yet. I like to make sure they're all seated before we tighten anything down. Now at this point, you do want to go ahead and reconnect your tail light. So we're going to grab that bundle of connectors and plug the main white connector in. If you are running external signals like what we've shown in the other video and a license plate light, you can also connect those at this time. And then we're going to slide this connector sleeve onto the post. If you removed anything from your trunk during this installation process, you can reinsert that, like the OEM toolkit that is included. And lastly, before we go ahead and reinstall the seat lock, we want to make sure that our wires are routed. In this case, we're only focusing on the taillight wire, as we didn't install signals or a license plate light. So you route the wire and then you simply bend the tab down to lock it in place. Now at this point, we can go ahead and grab our 10mm stainless steel bolt that we removed from the seat lock. And the seat lock has a little punch out on it, a little dimple that is a locator for where the seat lock goes and how it installs. It doesn't seat or punch through, but it does self-contain itself. And now we can go ahead and by hand install that bolt, ensuring you're not cross-threading. And once it's bottomed out, you can go ahead and tighten it. Now with everything reinstalled, pretty happy. Let's go ahead and tighten down these panels. Bottom it out, go about another 1/8 of a turn, ensuring that it's locked in place. Everything's locked in place. Got our owner's manual in there, and we're ready to reinstall the rider seat. We will remove these bolts we placed in as placeholders. We're going to slide the front of the seat with this tab under the rear portion of the gas tank, and then gently press down, allowing these bolts to self-locate. With the rider seat locked down and secured, you are free to reinstall the passenger seat or the seat cowl, ensuring that these hooks interlock with these tabs, allowing you to lock the seat in place. And the final step before we head on out to the outro is to reinstall your license plate. Before you tighten it down, make sure it's centered off, and then give that hardware a nice little snug, and you are good to go. So there you have it. The rear of this CB650R is completely cleaned up. We were able to not only remove this bulky and heavy OEM fender, but really clean up the entire rear of the bike while still retaining those important functions if you wish to have them, such as external signals and the license plate light. So if you're like us and you did ditch that, you can now go ahead and toss this to the side, go for a ride, and really enjoy it. If you want to check this product out, be sure to stop by our website, TST Industries. The link to this exact product is in the description below. If you found this video useful, be sure to give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, turn the notification bell on to stay up to date with all the new and exciting videos we've got coming out. And lastly, don't forget to stop by our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all username TST Industries. For now, this has been Mark from TST Industries. Catch you guys next time.